Here's a question. Have you ever done something that you thought was a good idea at the time, but looking back you realized it was a very bad idea? Well, today on Finding Traction, you'll get to learn vicariously from Vern's latest bonehead move. So welcome aboard.
Guys ready?
When it comes to porn, are you stuck, spinning out, or slipping backwards in your life? If so, then welcome to the Finding Traction podcast, a show dedicated to those who are looking to gain recovery momentum away from porn and toward the life and relationships they have always hoped for. Now, here's your host, Vern Tomke.
Well, here we are in mid-February, coming into Valentine's week of 2021, and life at our house is a little bit crazy. My wife, who's a teacher, has tested positive for COVID. I'm not sure if she got it from me or she got it from the kids. That's probably more likely. I've been in and out of classrooms on Thursday and Friday, so I might have got it and passed it on to her. And so I've been tested. And I'm still waiting back for the results. So I'm in a bit of a waiting period here, and we'll see how that plays out. So waiting for the results. Well, I want to look at this question. That's not my latest boneheaded move. I want to talk about this question. Have you ever thought something was a good idea, and looking back you go, oh my goodness, it definitely was not? Well, I want to share a story with you that happened to me this last week, and where I became part of a police incident. And you might wonder, well, what would a good guy like me cause all sorts of problems? Well, I did, and let me explain what happened. First of all, I got this call from my daughter. She had blown a tire on the Canada #1 freeway. Now, if you're not from here, the #1 freeway is the busiest highway, one of the busiest highways in Canada. It's only 2 lanes each way, believe it or not. We don't really believe in big, wide freeways here, but it's incredibly busy. And she had blown a tire, and she called me basically emotional and upset. And what had happened was she had got, first of all, her boss had come, or the company had come and helped fix her tire. But then because her hazard lights had been left on, now her battery was dead. And so she was still stuck there on the side of the road with no shoulder, with semis racing past, very close. And, it was one of these calls. And as a dad, you're just going, oh my goodness. Nobody wants to get those calls as a dad, because really she's in a very dangerous situation there. So I just grabbed some jumper cables. My son hopped in the car and basically said, hey, we'll be there in 10 minutes. And we raced out to where she was on the freeway. And as we're driving there, I'm going, that seemed like a good idea to help my daughter. Of course, every father wants to do that. But I realized, well, how am I going to give her a jump in the vehicle, because the cars are going to have to be face to face? And so I'm thinking this through as I'm driving, and then I make sure there's a long space behind, as long a space as possible, and I quickly do a U-ey on the freeway, and I come up face to face with her car so that the jumper cables will reach. So that's a dumb idea, number one, but it gets worse. Got her car jumped and started, and said, hey, off you go to work. You'll get your tires fixed, which she did. And now here I have a problem. I'm facing the wrong way on a busy freeway on the side of the far right with no shoulder. And as I'm looking at the cars coming to me at, probably 110, 120 kilometers an hour, which for you Americans would be maybe 65 miles an hour, I'm realizing, you know what? I don't have time to do a 3-point turn because the cars are going to be on me so fast. It just seemed to me that there was no time, and I was going to cause an accident. And I didn't have any time to do a 3-point turn and go back in the proper direction. So at the time I'm going, what is the safest thing to do? Well, it seemed to me that the safest thing to do was to put my hazard lights on and to crawl slowly back towards the previous exit. There was really no shoulder or no turn, out at all. But if I kept my hazards on, cars do pull over in the far right if they have car trouble. I could go against traffic slowly and make it back to the previous exit. It seemed right. It seemed safer to me than anything else. And so I'm slowly making my way back, maybe 20, 25 kilometers or miles an hour, whatever, slowly back. And we're going along, and some of the cars are honking at me, which makes sense. They don't like a car driving against the direction of the road. And we get about halfway back to the exit. And all of a sudden, I see 4, I'm not exaggerating, 4 police cars racing at me with their lights on. And they come racing up to me, both sides of the freeway. And they essentially surround me in and box me in with their police cars. Behind that, a 5th ghost car comes with his lights on. So now we have 5 police cars surrounded me on the freeway. The guy gets out and yells at me, basically, what are you doing? You've essentially, we've had so many 911 calls that this is what he said. You've almost shut down 911 in the last 5 minutes because of all these calls we've got. Now, a bit of a backstory. About 2 weeks ago, there was a fatal accident on that same stretch where 3 people were killed. Now, mind you, it was a police chase, and the car had driven onto the freeway and was going against traffic on the freeway, and the 2 people in the car trying to get away were killed, and also another innocent person was killed. Now, okay, that's a backstory, and maybe that is why so many people were freaking out, or the fact I was doing something stupid. And I know you're thinking at this point, like, what the heck are you thinking? And I just thought at the time it seemed like a good idea. And so I'm surrounded by police cars. The freeway, the number 1 freeway, is shut down. And I try to explain what had happened. And one guy was a bit of a good cop, and he was understanding, well, you're trying to help your daughter. And then the other cop car was having none of it. He says, well, why didn't you call 911? And I'm thinking, call 911? I don't call 911 unless it's an emergency. You always hear about stupid 911 calls. And I hadn't even thought of that. Looking back, what should I have done? We'll get to that in a minute. But so he says, well, this is, so he hands me, goes in his car and quickly writes out a ticket, which cost me about $500 Canadian, and for 2 different infractions, which none of them I was aware of. And then they say, turn around quick. We've got the freeway stopped, and so I was able to, obviously now, to do my 3-point turn and then head back going the right way on the freeway. And all of that is under the category, it seemed like a good idea at the time. Now, some of you have just shaking your heads right now and go, my goodness, I would never do that. I would never do something that stupid. And I get it. You're all much smarter than me. And, looking back, I realize it did not make a lot of sense. But I should have apparently, not apparently. What I should have done was I simply should have called like BCAA or your AAA sort of thing and had a tow truck come and deal with it who has proper emergency lights, or I guess call 911. But I didn't think of it at the time. And I was just trying to respond as a father would to their daughter in danger. So there you go. So I always told my kids growing up, I said, there's 2 types of ways you can learn lessons. Number 1, you can learn lessons from your own stupid mistakes. And that's one way to learn, and you'll never forget. I said, but an easier, less painful, less costly way is for you to learn from your friends' stupid mistakes. And if you learn that way, it's not going to cost you a lot. It's not going to be as painful, but you'll still learn the lesson. So if nothing else you've got from this podcast today is a great point of wisdom. The next time you get a call from somebody who is asking you to give them a jump on the freeway, just call a tow truck. And so it's already the price of admission for this podcast. You've learned a valuable vicarious lesson from Vern today. Now, so how do I partly parlay this into a recovery talk, other than the fact of don't do something stupid? Well, I was thinking about emotions, and it's really interesting because for the rest of the day, my son was with me, and I was actually quite proud. I was relatively calm through this, and I was able to model to him how to deal with police officers in a difficult situation. And I think he learned some lessons from me in terms of remaining calm and, hands on the wheel kind of thing. But it was interesting as the day went on, I felt like my temperature was about 2 degrees higher. No, I'm sure it wasn't, but I felt flushed. I felt like the adrenaline was flowing through my body, and I just felt off. I felt more intense. I felt more jacked up in terms of something. And it reminded me of this whole area of emotions and soothing. You've heard a lot about trauma. Sometimes it's stored in the body, or those things are stored in the body. And I could feel it for the rest of that day. When I went to bed at night, I couldn't get it out of my mind. And it reminded me of this study that was done. Me and my wife did a marriage course for 12, 13, 14 years. And they spoke about the idea of flooding. And flooding is where your emotions get flooded and your mind shuts down and you don't think straight. You get into this fight or flight mentality. And they compared the difference between men and women. And they said, it's interesting, they did this little, psychological study where they had a man come into a doctor's office, and they intentionally had the receptionist speak really rudely and abruptly to the man and just upset the man. And then they waited for 20 minutes to a half an hour, and then they had the doctor come and, go into the office, and then he checked his blood, his pulse and his heart rate and his blood pressure. And they did the same for women. They did exactly the same thing for women, where they did the same thing, and then they waited half an hour and they did the same for women. I don't know how they got permission to do this, but here was an interesting thing. They found after 30 minutes that women essentially had been able to self-soothe. They had been able to regulate their emotions and talk themselves down, and were back to basically a normal place emotionally. They found with men, however, that men were still in a heightened place of arousal and excitement and anger, and men apparently did not have as readily available the method of self-soothing. Now, some people have explained that as in an evolutionary sense about nursing mothers. Now, just to say, we've done John Gottman training marriage course, and I will say the exception though was women who, if women have been in abusive situations, they also are triggered and stay triggered. But in general, men had a much more difficult time self-soothing. So all the rest of that day, and it has happened earlier in the day, all the rest of that day, I was my emotions, my heart rate, I just felt. Just that I was off. I could feel that there was something resident in me, and I wasn't really able to soothe, and it took a passage of time for me to come down to normal. All of that sort of emotional awareness is absolutely crucial in the area of recovery. Let me explain this. You've probably heard the old HALT idea around things that make us susceptible to acting out. Hungry or horny is another good one. Hungry, horny, angry, lonely, tired. HALT. It's, just a really common thing. I would also put in a couple other ones. Instead of hungry, I throw in horny. And, I add to that B at the end, which is bored. Or stressed, HALTS. S is for me is stressed, and B is for bored. Any one of those things for me can be a real internal trigger. There's been a lot of talk, and I teach it in our Finding Traction course about triggers, external triggers. It's a pop-up ad. It's something you see. It's a woman you see. It's whatever it is. Those are external triggers. But the ones that are far more difficult to navigate are the internal triggers, where something happens to you emotionally. And as a result, what happens is you're more susceptible to acting out. You're more likely to reach for your favorite things that soothe you. My daughter gave for Christmas this huge package of Hawkins cheesies. I don't think you can get them south of the border, but Hawkins cheesies are one of my favorite snacks. And so I would often reach for that at night when we were watching a movie together. My Hawkins cheesies is a way of soothing. And, we would do the same thing. We reach for porn. When we were young, we learned masturbation as a way of self-soothing. And it's just something that stuck with us. All of that, if you haven't noticed, requires a degree of emotional awareness. Where we're able to really deal with our feelings and understand our feelings and the place and and where that takes us. One of the things I do in our groups, I meet with guys and I meet, in groups. The very first thing we do is we talk about our emotional landscape, our feelings. And we actually have a feeling chart, which we've picked up. You can get them online. And we always start by asking men, what have been your dominant emotions over the last day or two? And it's interesting. Early on, it's like guys look and go, I don't know. Hungry. It's either hungry or horny is kind of the only two emotions, or angry. Hungry, horny, and angry are the only three that we really able to feel. But over time, I've noticed that men get more nuanced and they get more curious and aware of what's going on inside of them. Let me also say that is a huge skill to learn in your marriage. One of the things me and my wife have done is recognized that we do a service to each other when we describe the filters that we're experiencing life through at that time. For example, my wife right now has got COVID. I think I said that, and she's sick, and she's got flu symptoms, and she basically, has been a little bit irritable. And some of the reasons is I kind of have been treating her, asked her to make coffee, and I think she just got, I'm sick. I got COVID. And, and so you might say, well, what another dumb thing to do is you're asking your wife to make you a coffee. But she, for example, it's a filter. She says, when I'm sick, I'm not in a very gracious mood to serve you. I will often say, when I'm feeling agitated, like to this morning, I can't find my driver's license. I'm trying to, my medical card number's on it, and I'm agitated right now. I'm agitated. I can't find my driver's license and my medical card. They're the same card, and I can't go online and check my test, and I'm just in an agitated place. And so I'll say to my wife, you know what, right now I'm just really agitated. So I just want you to be aware of that. And that's a huge help for her because she won't take it personally, or I won't take it personally. We give each other a lot more slack because we know the filter, the emotional place that each of us is coming for. I've noticed, for example, when I'm sick, so far I'm feeling pretty good. I've got a few mild symptoms, but I don't know, maybe I'm the only guy, or maybe I notice when I'm sick, I'm really tempted. Which just causes my wife to, shake her head. When I'm physically sick, the last thing she wants to do is be close to me. That's her perspective. But when I'm physically sick, I notice that I'm way more thinking about sex and or temptation or porn. And you might say, well, that's kind of weird, but I'm aware of that. I've developed a level of emotional awareness and curiosity just to be able to recognize how I'm doing day to day. So all of that is to say, hopefully you've learned some vicarious things from me today. I really do want to bless you in your recovery as you walk through this. Hopefully you won't be driving down the freeway the wrong way, even with the best of intentions. And whether that's a metaphor for your life or my life, there is definitely something to learn. So for next time, stay safe, wash your hands, continue to choose life, and walk out your path of recovery. God bless you.